everybody. It's great to be here. Just want to thank Steve and Alex Cohen for allowing this to happen today. I think it's always exciting for a home opener, especially when you have a good team like they have. And also want to thank Dave for inviting me to do this. You know, Eddie and I spent a lot of time together. 57 years I've known him. You know, think about Eddie when I think about his career. When people talk about him, it's not so much about his statistics, what he did a certain day, what they remember about him playing first base. It's about two things. It's about him being the first big name Met that was signed as a kid, 17 years old. And the second thing I think is important is that he was homegrown. The fact that he grew up in the Bronx, was from New York, and people related to that. And I think every time I was with him and saw him, or everybody met him, was about that thing about his life of being part of a New York based, and he was wise to the world. You know, signed at 17, but he was a player rep at 22 years old for the Mets, and so he knew the world. And what's interesting, I'll tell you the funny story. When I first got over to the Mets, I got traded from the Reds and didn't really know anybody. And Eddie came up to me one day and he said to me, "Listen, you're in New York now. It's a different world. It's not like that small city Cincinnati that he played in and grew up in St. Louis. This is New York." He said, "I'm going to tell you something that's going to change your whole outlook about baseball." And I said, "Really? All right." Now remember, he's younger than me. And he said, "You want to sit down?" I said, "No, tell me what it is." And he said, "Well, you're going to be going to a lot of breakfasts, a lot of lunches, a lot of dinners, a lot of testimonials, a lot of events that you're invited to." He said, "Just want to tell you one thing." And I said, "Hey, tell me already." He said, "Just remember one thing, always find a seat by an exit." And he was right. He was right. You always needed to find a seat by an exit. And I've done, over the years, I did so many appearances with him. We did Little Leagues, gave out trophies. We shared so many great moments. We were on Sesame Street together, Vegas singing, and for 2 weeks, Everybody Loves Raymond. I mean, so many things. And wherever we went, wherever I saw Eddie, or with him, inevitably somebody would walk up to him and say, "Eddie Kranepool, Monroe High School in the Bronx." Eddie would say, "Yeah, I was in your graduating class." And one day I said to Eddie, "How many people in your graduating class?" He said, "I don't know, 1,000, 1,200 people." I said, 25,000 people have said they're in your graduating class. They all wanted to be part of Ed Kranepool and his legacy of being a New Yorker, being with the same team for 18 years. And I'll tell you, when I heard the news, we had lunch. We were both in Florida, and when I had lunch on Thursday and I heard the news on Monday morning, it dawned on me that when Shea was being torn down, I had felt like part of my youth was taken from me. And when I heard the news about Eddie Kranepool, more of my youth was taken from me. And so I'm so happy that the team is honoring him. It's well deserved. Eddie's legacy will always be that street smart kid from the Bronx who spent 18 years with the same team. You won't see that very often anymore. And for me to have shared those wonderful moments with Eddie, and when he hit that home run, some of you might remember in Game 3, that they're old enough to remember, he hit a home run in Game 3 of the World Series, and of course we hadn't won yet, but when he was rounding the bases, I thought to myself, here's a guy whose life is going full circle. He's been with those horrible Met teams in 62, 63, 64, 65, we're losing 100 games every year. His home run in Game 3 of the World Series, and all of a sudden, a couple of days later, we win the World Series, and all of our lives changed that October 16th day in 1969. And so for me, sharing those wonderful years with Eddie, who even though he's younger than me, was much more street smart than me, and I've got some great memories and cherish those moments that we shared together, because we lost some close games when I came over in '68, to winning the World Series and sharing those moments with all those guys. You know, last year, some of you might know, we lost 5 members of the '69 team. It was a very difficult year for me on a personal level. And of course, when Eddie passed away, it was just a really tough day. So again, I'm thankful for the Mets for doing this. I feel it's well deserved, and his legacy will always be 18 years with the same team, street kid from the Bronx, and I think people remember him for that all
Anybody have any questions for Art?
Yeah.
So before you came to the Mets, I think you only played one game at first base with Cincinnati. How important was Ed's, mentoring you for the position when you played for the Mets?
Well, Eddie, I was an outfielder most of it. I did play a couple games at first base, but Eddie really had first base locked up. He would, he had some decent years playing first base, and of course in '69 when they put two into first base and right field and third base and second base, we all kind of shared in those glorious moments. But Eddie was a really good defensive first baseman, never got the credit for it, and he was a really pretty good hitter. And we never really talked about sharing first base or playing the same position, but he was mostly there, and I was mostly the outfield, so we never really had any talk about that.
Any other questions for Art?
Hi, Art. You mentioned the '69 team. Just what do you think it was about that group, that allowed you guys to keep this bond for so long, to where you were still so?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Sorry. What do you think it was about that 1969 group that allowed you guys to keep that bond for so many decades? What made it so special?
Well, I think they've won twice out here, and I tell people this is my thought process. The '86 team was an incredibly talented team, and won some unbelievably close games that came from behind. They were really a great come from behind team. But the difference between them and '69 is that they were expected to win. They came close in '85, and they had a team that started the season that people had great expectations, like this team out here today. We, on the other hand, were a team that finished ninth, a half game out of last place in 1968. Nobody thought that we were going to do anything, and that was the first year of division play, expansion and division play. And so when we started to play decent, and even beginning of the season, we weren't a very good team. But we had the leadership of a great manager in Gil Hodges, who got the most out of everybody. The beauty of Gil Hodges as a manager was that he had the ability to get everybody involved in the game, including everybody at the end of the bench, the guys you wouldn't think of that were going to be playing very much. And he had this ability to do it. Like I said, he platooned in 4 position and sometimes 5 with behind the plate with Jerry Grody and J.C. Martin. But I think all of a sudden we had this ability to believe in ourselves, and everybody was contributing to the success of that team. And that started sometime way back in July. Even in June and early July, we were not a very good team, but once we got into July and started playing really good baseball, we were unbeatable. And everybody thought we were going to lose 3 in a row to the Braves in the playoffs. And then we lost the first game in the World Series, which I incidentally made the last out of the first game. That's my legacy with the World Series. And everybody thought we were going to lose 4 in a row. We won the next game when Jerry Kuzman pitched great, came back to New York 1-1, and then everybody still thought we were going to lose the next 3. And we won the next 3, and again, all of our lives changed that October day in 1969. But I think the true legacy of that team, and I still do appearances and I still do things. I just have a new book out, my 3rd book, about that team. I tell people more books have been written about the '69 Mets than any sports team in history. And I'm serious about that. The Yankees might have had more team books written about them as an organization, but '69 Mets are still viable, and people want to talk about it. They want to know what happened that day when the Black Cat ran on the field. Tom Seaver's almost perfect game. Steve Carlton striking out 19 and us winning the game. I mean, there's so many things that people still want to talk about. And as I mentioned before, all those people that said they went to high school with Ed Kranepool, on the other side of the coin, whenever I meet people, somebody inevitably says, I was at the last game at Shea when you won the World Series, and over the years it's probably been thousands and thousands of people, and I realized that park held about 53,000 people. Not everyone were at that game, but they want to relate to being there, and it doesn't make any difference if they thought they were there, they were, or they weren't. It was just, it's that they want to talk about that team. And it's in some ways it's magical, because we're what now, 56 years later, and we're still talking about it. Or at least I go out and talk about it, and people want to know about it. And very briefly, I know you guys got to get going, but whenever I talk to people, especially people who are a little bit older, what happens to them is really simple. They become young for about an hour. They remember when they went to the ballpark with their parents or their grandparents, and so for me it makes me feel young also. but I get that all the time because it is a team that kind of lives on forever. And I say this with all due respect to everybody that's won championships. There's two teams in the history of the game that resonate with people, fans, years after they won. One of them will be 100 years in 27, and that's the 27 Yankees, who we know about with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and all that great cast of characters, in the 69 Mets. You know, I know it's maybe I'm a little pro 69, but it's true. I see it all the time, and Jay gets it too. I mean, he's current, but he also gets a lot of people don't want to talk about the 69 Mets. So for me, even though this is a sad but kind of thoughtful day regarding Eddie Kranepool, we still talk about that team, and it still makes me feel good to have been part of it. You know, I played 13 years, and really, for all intents and purposes, nobody ever talks about the other 12. It's really about 1969. So I've dealt with it all these years, and for me to be part of the Met history, you know, I always told my teammates on that team that no matter what happens in your life or your career, your name will always go down in history as being part of this incredible team that won in a year where the Jets won, we won, and then the Knicks won in May of '70, and at a time when the city was really in deep trouble, the country, we're in a world that's upside down now, of course, but back then the war in Vietnam was tearing the country apart, and what we did as a team collectively, so we made people feel better about their lives for a brief period of time, and they passed that on from generation to generation, and I don't want to take away from Eddie Kranepool, but Eddie was such a big integral part about that, and I miss the guy because he was, again, not only a good friend, but a wonderful teammate, and very, very street smart. He knew about the world at 17 years old.
Any last ones for Art, guys, ladies? Okay. Thank you.